Good morning, Las Vegas. This is Andrew Pollard with It's Where I Am. Today, my guests are Dr. Levin of Henderson Pediatrics. He's the lead investigator for a new COVID-19 vaccination. Nevada's opening up. People have gotten the Pfizer vaccine, they've gotten Moderna. Now there is another vaccination that will be coming our way. It is in a double-blind study at the moment. It is not FDA approved yet. However, it's coming. So I wanted this guest to be on the show to tell us more about this new vaccination. Hello, Dr. Levin.
Hi,
Thank you for being on It's Where I Am.
my pleasure.
So I was telling our listeners about the new COVID-19 vaccination that is not FDA approved yet. However, it will be coming our way sometime in the near future. You've already worked with adults, or the study has already worked with adults, and now they are vaccinating adolescents. So can you tell us more about the new COVID-19 vaccine?
All right, so it's Novavax, Novavax is the name of the company. And this takes a more conventional or traditional approach to vaccination. Most of our other vaccines, and up to the point of the messenger RNA vaccines, were vaccines that had either modified proteins from the pathogens or pathogens that were disabled so that they could not cause disease but would create an immune response. And the Novavax vaccine uses the spike protein, which they produce artificially in the laboratory to vaccinate individuals. In contrast with the messenger RNA vaccines that are already emergency use approved by the FDA, which are the Moderna vaccine and the Pfizer vaccine and the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. The first two are used messenger RNA, which is injected. The messenger RNA gets into the cells of the body and uses our cells as factories to produce the spike protein, which then our body sees as foreign invaders, and the body develops an immune reaction to them. The Johnson & Johnson uses a adenovirus that's been disabled that has spliced into it a DNA code for the spike protein. And that gets injected, a few cells get infected with that virus. They become factories for producing the spike protein that our bodies then react to and develop the immunity to. And Novavax takes a more traditional approach that we have with like our hepatitis B vaccine, where there's a recombinant protein made in the lab. It's the recombinant protein which is injected. So it skips that step of turning our cells into factories that make the spike protein.
Okay. So you brought up Johnson & Johnson.
Right.
So with this Novavax, once it becomes approved, because it sounds as if it's going to get there, it's going to get approved, right?
It appears to be. It's at the FDA now. All the data's there, and they're looking to obtain an emergency use approval, like the other vaccines have already. That they expect to have this quarter.
Oh wow! So it's coming pretty soon. So
Right.
2022, Novavax may be available.
Right. It would be possibly. I mean, when the other vaccines got their EUA approval, there was vaccine available, essentially already produced and ready and being distributed, so that as soon as they got the EUA approval, we had vaccines to administer to the public, and so presumably this will happen with Novavax as soon as it gets the EUA approval.
So will it be easier to store than the other vaccines? Because I know that was an issue at one time.
Yes, this vaccine does not require freezing. It can be stored at refrigerated temperatures.
Okay.
Logistically, that's going to make it much easier. Some of the other, like Pfizer right now, it has to be stored, but once it's thawed, it can be held now for almost 30 days. And that's what many offices in town are using right now. The health district has distributed it. In fact, Henderson Pediatrics has the Pfizer vaccine available for anyone 12 and above. They don't even have to be a patient there. They don't have to be a pediatric patient. So the storage situation, even for that vaccine, has changed since it originally came out. This vaccine will be much easier to ship. It'll be much easier for worldwide distribution if it doesn't need those extreme freezing temperatures to maintain stability until it's open. So that's one of the advantages of Novavax vaccine. I think there may be others.
Mhm. And then, so what about the variants with this vaccine? What are the variants with that? How do they compare with the other vaccinations that are already, or vaccines that are already here?
So the press release, I think it was about 2 weeks ago when Novavax said it was being submitted to the FDA, an overall efficacy, including all the strains, of 90%.
Oh, wow. Okay, so that's even better than the other two.
Well,
I'm not even
the
including Johnson and Johnson. I just like totally took them out of my brain waves a long time ago.
Johnson and Johnson's lower. Moderna and Pfizer originally said 95%, roughly 95%, and that was before some of these other strains came in. So even I think Pfizer's saying about 85, 88%. Don't quote me, but it looks like this is a comparable in protection. And we are still talking for all these vaccines relatively short times to see what they're doing, and the story is still being written every day with all these vaccines.
Right. But this Novavax, it's the research has gone on longer than the Pfizer and Moderna. Is that correct?
No, the Novavax vaccine research the trials started after the Moderna and Pfizer started last summer. Novavax, I believe, was in the fall. I was brought on, or their site was brought on only to do the pediatric expansion of the adult study, which was done in the United States. One of the studies was done in the United States and Mexico and had 30,000 participants in it. And they did something slightly different than a double-blinded trial. It's the same model they're using in pediatrics, where what they have is called a blinded crossover. So, and they also increased the number of patients initially getting the vaccine from 50-50, like in the other studies, to 2-to-1 getting vaccine over placebo. And so subjects enter the studies, and they don't know, and the only people who know what they got are what's called the unblinded staff, who actually handle the vaccine, are told by the randomization software what patient will get what, and they actually go in the refrigerator, drop the vaccine or the placebo, and they're the ones who know. So the patients don't know what they get, and I don't know what they get. My staff who are doing the intakes for this, they don't know what the patients are getting. And then they bring everybody back for another round of injections. And if they got placebo in the first part of the study, they'll get the vaccine in the second part of the study, and vice versa. So that's called a blinded crossover. Whereas the other studies did, everybody came in, got either placebo or vaccine, and they were followed to the point where they had enough data based on case collection of COVID infections and when they determined that the vaccine looked efficacious, they brought everybody back in, or did it over the phone, depending on the study, and let everybody who was a placebo patient know that they got the placebo, and then offered them the vaccine. So that's blinding. So it's a slightly different way of doing the study.
So can you explain to our listeners what is the benefit of even having a placebo? Why not just give the vaccination? Explain that for us.
Okay, because, well, the placebo studies is where they determine, does the vaccine work? Are the side effects due to the vaccine, the side effects that people report after getting it, are they due to a placebo, or are they getting the vaccine? The mind is very powerful, as you know,
Yes.
and someone thinks they're getting an injection of vaccine, they may report symptoms, and but if they don't know whether they had the placebo or the vaccine, um, it's people do report symptoms with placebos, and I can vouch for that from personal experience here, and that's a general construct for placebo studies. Um, the case-driven aspects of these studies were, so if you have a placebo and a vaccine, we don't know if these vaccines work yet. We only knew from phase 1 and phase 2 trials that they generated antibodies, and the antibodies worked in a test tube against the virus. And the question was, in the real world, do these vaccines work? So people, the original studies overall wanted people at high risk for severe complications of COVID, as well as people at high risk to get the infection, essential workers, essentially. So people got these, the series of the 2 injections for the Moderna. Pfizer was set up the same way, and Novavax is done the same way. And then they went about their lives, presumably distancing, wearing masks, washing their hands. But some of them were in high-risk positions, working in medical, taking care of patients, working in, frontline workers, as we say, and not necessarily just in the medical, but people in stores, casinos for Las Vegas as things opened up. And if you recall, back around Thanksgiving through January, there were huge numbers of cases of COVID overall. We had those high numbers. And so inevitably, when you're enrolling 30,000 patients across the country in a study, some of these people got COVID. So they were instructed, and plus there was surveillance phone calls to reach out to the patients to remind them to contact if they had any symptoms at all of COVID. People were brought in, and the cases mounted pretty quickly, much quicker than anybody expected, for all these subjects who were in the study and who got COVID. So once they had a certain number, and those numbers are determined by the sponsors and their biostatisticians, they needed a certain number of patients to develop COVID. And then they did what was called interim analysis. What that means is at the sponsor level, that sponsors are the pharmaceutical companies and the organizations that run the studies for them, they then looked at all these cases. Let's say there were 100 people who got COVID. They looked and see whether they got vaccine or placebo. Okay? And if vaccine worked, that would mean that work, and we can define what work would be of efficacy. But if there were more cases of COVID occurring in the placebo recipients, that would tell you that the vaccine was protective. Okay. And that's where you get those numbers. If it was random, if the vaccine didn't do a thing, you would expect roughly equal numbers of people who got vaccine and equal number of people who got placebo to get the infection, meaning that vaccine didn't protect anybody. So those numbers with those initial messenger RNA vaccine trials were much better than we even get with our seasonal flu vaccines. Almost as good as some of the vaccines we consider nearly 100% effective, like measles, for example, measles vaccine.
But wait a minute, doctor. I want to ask you this since you brought up the flu. Are we supposed to get a booster with our vaccination of COVID-19? And will there need to be a booster with the Novavax as well? Is there like a booster shot necessary? Like after you get your 2 shots in another year, you have to get a booster, another 5 years? Is that making sense?
Those questions are being looked at right now.
Okay.
There are going on, planned, and I believe some have started looking at the third dose of these vaccines in subjects who were in the original studies.
So then if you had, say if I had a Moderna shot or a Johnson and Johnson, someone had a Johnson and Johnson shot, can they then get a booster of the Novavax, or do they have to stick with the same, you know, vaccine that they took before?
We don't know the answer yet, and
Okay.
they're looking at it. I know of people who aren't in studies who went out and got a second round of vaccines with the other messenger RNA vaccine.
Uh-oh.
I'm aware of individuals like that who've taken it upon themselves. I get patients in the study in Moderna, which I can talk about, who ask, can I go get a booster shot? And they're not supposed to get a booster shot if they're in the study. It is not recommended yet for anybody to get a booster shot officially. What, this is where I want to get back to what constitutes a good vaccine. If a vaccine that prevents disease 100%, that's a great vaccine. We know already, even from the initial data, that these were 95%, 95% effective for the strains that were going on at the time. And there are breakthrough cases that occur. So it's not so in terms of preventing the infection 100%, they're not doing that right now. But if the vaccine can reduce or prevent someone from getting extremely sick, hospitalizing, or dying from COVID infection, that's also considered a very effective vaccine.
I told a few people that you were coming on the show, and I got quite a few questions. And I want to ask you some of them. And one of them was about the booster. Another was about someone mentioned things that have happened to them after they've gotten vaccinated from either Moderna or Pfizer,
Right.
and not reading the side effects. Often a lot of people feel like, if something happens to them coincidentally, it's related to the vaccine. And so that ties in with a lot of fear that
Yes.
we have, and why people are choosing not to get vaccinated, or those who have gotten vaccinated are still afraid that, they're having some reaction to it. Can you explain what the side effects are for Novavax?
What we are seeing with Novavax are local and systemic reactions that you see with many other vaccines. This is what I'm observing in the small, our patients in the pediatric study: sore arms, headaches, fevers, malaise, just feeling yucky for a couple days at most. The chills and fevers that have been reported have been like 12 hours, similar to what we saw with Moderna. The concerning problems, not with Novavax, but with any vaccine that's being studied, and again, these studies, because it's a pandemic, because the government said this is a serious health problem, people are dying, we need to get vaccines, is they do an emergency use authorization based on 30,000 people, 15,000, and originally it's only about half of them that got the vaccines. So it's still not the 100 million people that are getting vaccinated now. So if there's a more severe side effect than the expected local reactions and the systemic reactions that we consider tolerable, I think most people would say, I'm okay having a headache and being tired and having a fever for a day or two or three, rather than ending up with pneumonia and long COVID and these other problems. Then people are willing to take that. But
Sure.
when you're giving a vaccine, and let's say you have a side effect which occurs, but it's only occurring in 1 in 500,000, 1 in a million, 1 in 100,000. Until you get large numbers of people vaccinated, which they do as on the emergency basis, that's when you start seeing the rarer side effects. I think you could say that's the example with the Johnson & Johnson and the thrombocytopenia, low platelets with the blood clots that are rare but devastating. And we're starting to, and there's now Moderna and Pfizer put warnings on their labels now stating that there is a risk of myocarditis, an inflammation of the heart.
Okay. Thank you
So,
for explaining that.
well, anyway, those things have not been seen with Novavax in the 30,000 in the US. Plus, there were studies in England on Novavax too.
Okay.
So will we see those? It's only once it gets the EUA approval, and we I would anticipate if we're not going to see those things because these are different vaccines made a different way. We have a lot more experience with protein-based vaccines, and the DNA and RNA vaccines are brand new in terms of being given to hundreds of millions of people.
So, Dr. Levin, I would like you to give your information for the clinic, for your clinic, so that people can find you, research you, look on the website. Can you give us the information to Henderson Pediatrics?
Okay, well, Henderson Pediatrics is, my phone number is 702-893-8968. That's a private practice of pediatrics. We start seeing the babies when they're born, and we go up to 18. We've extended it slightly because people were having trouble with access to healthcare during COVID, but generally we go to 18 when they're adults. And then the research being done there is being done with me as the investigator, and I work as a contractor for Wake Research. That's a company which acquired the entity that I've worked with for 20 years. So it's called Wake Research, Clinical Research Center of Nevada. And we have a number of trials going on here for COVID. I'm only allowed to talk about the sponsors who allow us to announce their names, like Moderna, like Pfizer. The phone number is 702-893-8968. And there is the website as well, if they look up Wake Research CRCN, and they'll give them more information. I believe we'll be having studies, I was just in a meeting, to do there are some new, because the messenger RNA vaccines are now out there with the COVID trials, for a number of years, they've worked on this platform for vaccines that COVID came about and got it out. So they're looking at influenza vaccines using messenger RNA, which should be a lot more effective than our regular flu vaccines, which are protein-based, as well as there are some live attenuated vaccines. If people recall the nasal mist vaccine for the flu, that's actually a live virus that's been changed so it doesn't make you sick. So there will be other, there are always opportunities to do research, or always things upcoming. So if you have, if anyone out there is interested in participating in clinical trials, we're one of, we will have other things for them.
Well, I just want to thank you for your time. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your explanation, and thank you for your expertise, Dr. Levin. And I will have your information on my website. So everyone, you can go to itswhereiam.com, click on the community resource page, and you will see Dr. Levin's practice there, which is Henderson Pediatrics. So thank you so much for being here, Dr. Levin.
My pleasure. Anytime, and I'd be happy to speak anytime you want to speak.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate it, because I will ask you to come back.
All right.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Hi, Curtis. I'm well. Thank you for joining us. So
Hey, thank you for having me.
this segment is going to be called the Community Spotlight. And
Okay.
we're going to take a few moments to talk about what you do in the community.
Okay.
So
Let's
tell
talk. Well, I'm a martial artist, so I've been teaching martial arts in this community for about 6 or 7 years now.
5 p.m. to 9 p.m. And so
Yeah.
you're teaching children, correct, or adults, or both?
I teach children and adults.
Children and adults at Doolittle Community Center, martial arts and boxing.
Yes. And I also do boxing with Richard Steele's gym. I'm an amateur promoter for Richard Steele's boxing.
Okay. Well, thank you for being a part of Community Spotlight. I will put your information on the website. I just want, Las Vegas to know what's out there, what's happening, how they can get involved, and who's there to help. So I want to thank you for what you do.
All right.
All righty. Thank you.
Thank you
It's
for having me on your
Variance.
show.
You're,
You are you are beautiful this morning.
oh, thank you. Thank you. I want to thank all my 91.5 Jazz and More listeners for tuning in this morning. I'll be with you next month, Saturday at 8:30 a.m. Thank you. It's where